Most people don't change because they think they already know what's right, what matters, who they are. And to be fair, that's what we're taught to do. Pick a side, defend it, stay consistent. But life doesn't work like that. The longer you pay attention, the more things stop being so clear. Strong opinions soften, certainty fades, and the questions get better. Not easier, just better. Because somewhere between what you believe and what's actually true, there's a gap, and most people avoid it. That's where the work is. That's where you learn. That's where you grow. That's where things start to make sense again. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to move forward. This isn't about being right. It's about seeing clearly and being willing to change your mind when it matters. So don't bet against the ones who question things, especially when they question themselves. This is Chasing Common Ground. All right, so welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. I'm a little bit rusty. I haven't recorded one of these in like a month or two, but I've brought back my good friend, George Pagan III. How are you doing today, George?
Oh, good. It's a nice Saturday here in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, it's recording episodes on a Saturday has a different vibe about it. Like, I feel like people are a little bit more relaxed. Maybe they've had more time to do their morning ritual. Like for me, I like to put together a good coffee, kind of get in the zone. But I was reflecting, and like the last time we did a podcast together on my show, it must have been a few years ago. So a lot of life has happened since. Like I know for me, since 2020, 2021, 2022, like the years have just gone by super, super fast. I'll look back at old milestones and I'll be like, wow, like it used to feel like forever to achieve like a milestone with a client or a milestone with like a certification or a milestone with like a facility or something like that. Now they're just like flowing together. So, George, I'd love if you could fill me in on some of your biggest achievements that you're really proud of that have happened in the last couple of years.
I mean, since we've spoken last on here, I have opened my own facility in 2023, which was probably the biggest thing that I have done career-wise outside of deciding to go completely solo, maybe in 2011. So that was like my biggest step. And I've really, like you said, things have just been flying since I've opened it. And it's just hard to kind of grasp each day slowly over the course of these past years, which all seem to just blend together now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the way you put that is so perfect because that's how I've been describing it to everybody, whether it's like conversations with my in-person clients or even with just like family members. I'm like, whoa, like it's just one big blur.
Yeah.
And for me, like we'll kind of get into this more later in the episode, but primarily I think about how it's important to kind of like make time for the things that we think that we'll always have time for, like traveling or going for coffee with friends or making time for like family members and stuff like that. I know that that has been a prominent thing for you because like I've seen what you write about and I've seen like how invested you are in your friends and your clients, in your family, stuff like that. What's it like being an ambitious person as you are, because you're always pouring yourself into everything that you do with Fitletes.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like to just kind of like press pause on the career momentum to make time for life things?
It's a little bit like playing tug of war with two different people of the same person. I am the ambitious coach person, but I'm also this other guy who likes, like you said, likes hanging out with friends, talking with friends, trying to spend time with family, making time for my wife Nikki, because we love to do things together. And I'm always in a little bit of a tug of war with that. So I really have more been taking to goal planning and goal setting and just trying to stay within those bounds, like not try to distract myself with things I could be doing or trying to get a little bit more done rather than shutting things down and, just being like, I'll be able to get this done, tomorrow or the day after that, but more or less just like staying on the path that I want to stay on, making sure that this tug of war, kind of just like stays in the middle. It doesn't get just always pushed to one side, which for me is going to be the working side, because I like the idea of being productive, and sometimes I get lost in that. So goal setting has really helped, and then also journaling. Like
Hmm.
as it's something I never did, and it's kind of difficult to get used to now, but journaling has helped me kind of like stay in the moment of being like, well, what, like if I'm writing about something, I can either get it out if it's something I'm struggling with, or I can reassess what I have been doing while I'm writing it, or reading back a couple of entries deep to see if I've made too hard of a shift to one side of that tug of war spectrum, I guess.
You got me thinking about journaling and how I've shifted my own views of it. Because I know when I recorded podcasts with people as early as 2018, 2019, 2020, journaling came up a lot. And it
Hmm.
kind of seemed like one of those must be nice sort of items. Like if I had time, it would be nice to be the kind of person who journals. And then as life shifted and I learned new things about myself or I went through different things, journaling almost became as straightforward as like brushing your teeth. And I think the reason why it became so straightforward is because the expectation shifted. Where for me, I no longer felt like I had to be perfect in order to be someone who journaled. And also, I realized that sometimes it was about keeping the momentum. Like if you're going through something that would otherwise halt the momentum, if you journaled about it, it could be the one thing that helped you keep momentum. Now, I'm curious, has there been any times when you've reflected that you've found that it's forced you to slow down? Like when you're journaling, have you ever had any times when you've gotten really reflective on things and then you're like, oh, should I be doing this? Or, oh, like, am I good enough or anything like that? Or do you find it's always keeping you steadfast and moving forward?
I do think it is reflective, like you're saying, like you do have to think a little bit, be because you're, I mean, for me, I'm always thinking of things in the future.
Hmm.
So me being able to get things that I'm thinking of in the present, writing them down, it does help me slow down, because I have a spreadsheet full of goals and task lists that I can kind of reference of things that I want to do. But I think it's good. Like I use the journal more or less for short entries of like what I've done, what I'm doing, and how I'm feeling. And then I just kind of close it. Like I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to dive deeper for each individual entry. I would say it's more just kind of like getting a log of like what I'm doing. So I
Yeah.
can kind of stay on task of like how I want to live my life, like what lifestyle I want to try and have, how does it work with any of my future goals. So I kind of just, it helps me stay in check with what I've told myself that I want. So I just try to keep doing those things.
Yeah. Well, I like that because it's sort of a way to take the emotion out of it and make it more about, I don't want to say data in this instance or data, however you say it, but that is kind of what it is. Like it's allowing yourself to think about what is fact, what is within your capacity. Maybe not so much thinking about what's in control, but what's in capacity. Because as we kind of reflect on as we're discussing all these things, like it's a balancing act that can't be balanced. Like we know all the different things that we can do, but we know that we can only do so much,
Right.
especially for someone like you, because you're running a training business, but then you also have like an all encompassing hub for trainers to go and find continuing education. They can find resources that could kind of help them through a lull. They can find like locations for things, they can find sources for things. It's like a career in and of itself. And that's just one of your, like, a person would define that as a side hustle, even though it takes up more time than a main hustle. And so it goes without saying that you're going to feel a bit spread thin. But with that said, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So if you were giving somebody else advice on how to manage all these things in the professional realm alone, not even in the personal realm, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Is to, I would say, is to step out your things you want to do with what you consider is like your side hustle,
Hmm.
versus your main hustle. This way you can appropriately dose it, and you're not just overwhelming your stuff with, tasks to finish. And that's something I've learned over the years of doing it, is like I could, theoretically, after I'm done training, just go all in each day and spend an extra 6-8 hours trying to do more stuff with Fitly, the directory itself. But I know that that's unsustainable, and it's going to pull too many resources energy wise away from my main business. So it's I guess it's just keeping more insight of like how you're trying to do the thing and how it fits with your life, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, not it's I don't think it's that complicated. I just think it's difficult to kind of bring yourself back to the reality of like, if you're trying to do this by yourself on your own, you kind of curb your ambitions in terms of speed for some things, and make more room for patience with how the projects progress.
Hmm. I want to pause this conversation for a second, and it's not to shift gears, but just to acknowledge something. The store at store.invigoratetraining.com isn't really just about merch. It's my way of staying connected with this community of people who's followed along with me throughout my 20s and now into my mid 30s. You'll find women's fitted racerbacks with the line, "I might look normal, but deep down I question why I agreed to do 40 push-ups per day." Because sometimes humor comes after you've done the work. And there's the legacy CL gear, the hat and the toque that you see me wearing all the time, along with t-shirts that say, "Don't bet against the quiet ones." Because often the underdogs are the biggest game changers in life. There are custom shoes that I designed myself with the mantra, "Stay kind, stay strong, keep going," built right into the design. And there's also Park Far Away Club stickers and reusable bags for all your shopping needs. Additionally, I've created a line of fully human apparel, a reminder that self-improvement isn't just a one-size-fits-all template, it's personal. If we were all the exact same, we'd never truly be human. All pricing on the website is in Canadian dollars, shipping is inclusive, and your orders are often shipped domestically. This helps avoid tariffs or extra fees. This store exists because of you, and my career exists because of you. I'm genuinely grateful you're here. I'm grateful for all the people who work with me, and I'm so excited that we get to build something meaningful together. If anything here resonates, you can find it at my store at store.invigoratetraining.com. And thank you for being part of my world. So, one of my favorite things to do with having a podcast that sort of acts as a time capsule to where, like, when people want to kind of see how far somebody's come, they can actually go back to an old episode. So, for example, if a person wants to see where you were at a while back, they can actually search through my catalog of episodes and they can find your previous episode.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I want to highlight here is kind of putting goals out into the ecosystem so that we can kind of like, I believe that when you enroll people in your world into the goals that you have, it kind of empowers you to make them happen maybe a bit faster, because it opens up your world to the potential like teamwork, collaboration, stuff like that. Sometimes it's just like somebody hears the goal and they've done like 70% of it, and so they can give some critical or crucial advice. That said, within all your reflection and all your planning that you do for your future, are there any goals that you foresee you could complete in the next couple of years that you'd be willing to share with the podcast audience?
On the personal training side, my biggest goal with that is to develop a more hybrid program where it's still local. Like, I like working with people locally in Miami, but obviously, like, if you're an in-person personal trainer, there is some hours limitations. Like, I can only, work with so many people so many hours in the day. Whereas if I have a more of a hybrid programming approach, whereas like I train people, let's say online, through coaching, and then they can come into the facility maybe as a group, or on an individual basis as needed, that's probably the side I'm trying to build out more. So is really
Mhm.
just focusing on honing in on how to develop that with the company I use for software and programming.
Yeah.
So I make sure that it doesn't take away too much energy from the in-person clients that I have, but it's something where I can, reasonably scale my efforts without taking away my desire to be a coach. Like I like coaching. I don't want to just be this business manager of coaching. Like I want to do the coaching still.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is a common sentiment for a lot of people in the space. There's a ton of people who work with a lot of different human beings throughout the course of the week, and everybody's happy. Like the clients are happy, the coach or trainer is happy, life is good. But then you start to realize, okay, like that next level, how do we achieve that next level? And we don't want to do it in a malicious way where we're going to like burn the commitment we've made with people. Like we
Hmm.
still want to have that same level of connection. We still want to have that same quality of training. And then sometimes what I like to do is I sort of like reverse engineer the experience, because I'm like super hardcore tech guy. I like nerding out on things. I like to try out the different platforms and make things look streamlined and efficient and awesome. But what I've learned as I've gotten older is like sometimes the answer is in what the clients talk about the most.
Right.
And like for me, even just getting clear on the fact that clients appreciate being reminded every tiny little detail of the exercise every time that they do the exercise. Because as a trainer and coach, we like to think that if we streamline things and get everybody to be an expert, all we have to do is be like, okay, for this one, it's going to be a kickstand bilateral mid sagittal cross reference bipedal palette press. Like we can make something sound super super fancy, and we can think, okay, they graduated my system, they know exactly what I'm talking about, this is going to be optimal and they're going to have a good experience. But the truth is, if we had like a very raw one-on-one with the people that we're working with, that actually might not be their experience. They might be like, well, actually what I enjoy most about having this service is I like the connection, the accountability. I like that I can shut my brain off.
Hmm.
And I like that if I forget what that exercise was, that nobody even worries about it. And I just get the explanation and I can get back to work. And like the reason why this has kind of sunk in for me so much is because I started to notice like repeating patterns. Like I'm a very thorough person when I'm explaining things, but a lot of times I'll have to remind somebody like when to inhale, when to exhale, or like certain things on a stance on like a landmine press, or modifications that they could use for a side plank. And there's no harm in it, because that's the whole point, is like we are not meant to live in isolation. Like when we look at this from a personal standpoint, when we look at this from a societal standpoint, from a business standpoint, people need people.
Hmm.
And so as you're evolving your service model, and the cool thing is like I can totally vouch for the fact that I could like go into another room, leave you to your own devices, and know that your clients are getting the exact same experience as they do when they're getting that in-person experience as you evolve it into hybrid, just because of how you live your life and how you carry out your values. Like there's no scenario that I could possibly imagine where a person could think that they're having a lesser experience. And I think some of that is what you kind of talked about with the whole like if they were on a hybrid system, maybe they'd come in under a group format.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, a group format probably benefits them more as a human being than like a one-on-one format. And that isn't even to discredit a one-on-one format. Like if somebody carried out their whole career and they just do one-on-one training, their people are going to be in good hands. But then if somebody else evolved their career in their later years, like I like to think that if a person's going into the next decade of training how that training is experienced is going to evolve just the same as how that person evolves as a human being. And that's
Yeah.
how we see like some established trainers, they'll do like very large events. Like they'll do like a TED Talk style event. And essentially that whole audience is some representation of their clientele. It's either people who have experienced some part of their work, people who have actually like hired them for something, but
Right.
to some degree that's their client base, and it's just they built up such a body of work that their client base fills a bigger room now. But what I wanted to get at is that under the lens of evolving our business goals, we start to realize that we hit a standstill if we don't incorporate other people into our business goals, and that's very much from a social perspective. And so I know that we both go to lots of conferences and stuff. And I think I saw in your story recently that you were at a conference. Were you watching Dr. Katie Debrowski on stage? Was that your
Yes.
story I saw?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me more about that one.
So I had never met her before, and before going to the conference, I realized that she is actually down in Miami also. So that made it even more attractive to go to the event and be like, oh, I can actually connect with the coach that's physically in an area where I can meet up with them in person on on days where it works both for our scheduling. So that was like another plus, because sometimes going to these events that are a little bit further away, it's always difficult to find points to connect in person again. Like online's great, like talking is great, video conferencing is great, like
Yeah.
podcasting is great. It's just sometimes it's good to have people local to you that you can connect with. I mean, for me personally, I work 90% of my day is myself and my clients. So
Yeah.
having other people local is huge. And her talk was about something that I am really familiar with and try to talk with my clients about often, which is lifespan and health span. And it was a neuroscience specific conference, so it wasn't directly specific to what the conference had for the other talks, but her presentation was one that included some cognitive enhancements from training later into your years and planning now to do that so you can be the best version of yourself in 20, 30 years, which is what I liked a lot and try to coach my clients through on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, I haven't met Katie in person yet, but I've interacted with her online, like setting her up with podcasts or even just replying to story posts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she is such a down to earth, humble, kind person who is
Yeah.
also extremely like the way that she thinks is very valuable to the industry because she's able to level up a lot of people at scale without too much friction, without making somebody feel like they're not ready to learn or that they're not good enough to learn. I think that's a big thing, is kind of taking ego aside and just like having integrity in what you do. Like some people hold others to a high standard and being like, hey, if you're going to learn more about lifting, you better be lifting. But they're also like, if you're lifting and you are on year one, then that's good. Just keep going. They're not saying like you have to be a year 7 lifter or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's a good environment because it's nurturing for people who actually just want to be better and they're willing to put in the work. The other thing that I'm thinking about them eventually going to bridge us towards is that I've observed as people struggle in the industry, either like socially or even just with their little business milestones that they're wanting to achieve, it usually ties together with like an absence of inter-industry connection. So even if it was strictly on a local level, because like we've had a few local conferences here in Edmonton where I'll see like a lot of international attendees, but then I'll see local Edmonton attendees. And like that was like their first conference ever because we brought it to Edmonton. And sometimes I'll see like, and first and foremost, I am someone who isn't necessarily the most social person in the room. Like I warm up to people after I get to know them, like on a one-on-one level, but otherwise I tend to be pretty reserved, keep to myself and kind of read the room. But at the same time, I can do that and I'll still connect with like at least 5 new people just from like standing in a fixed position and having some open body language. But I'll see instances where people will go to their only conference that they've ever been to, and just that competition will be ingrained in their mind. They're
Right.
like, no, I have to be the very best in this room. And if I was to talk to somebody, well, that would make me worse, kind of thing. Or like, they don't know what I know. And I think that's a big mistake for people, because I've been in the industry long enough that I've seen enough trainers go from being a trainer to being a real estate agent, selling insurance, and to doing something completely different altogether. And it's totally fine to change careers. We all change careers at some point in our life. But if somebody's desire was to not change careers and they just really love training and they just wanted to make training viable so that they could keep doing it, I think the key is to consistently and always, regardless of comfort level, put yourselves in rooms with other people and be open to learning from other people in the room. And for me, at this point in my life, for me, it's specifically not the presenters. Like, I'm not saying I'm not going to listen to the presenters. I love listening to presenters, but I look at it from an angle of like, when I go to things, I know without a shadow of a doubt that there's probably an abundance of things that I can learn from other people who are also watching that same presentation.
Yeah.
And it could even be like, I could be sitting next to someone who's brand new to the industry, and how they receive the presentation might give me clues of what to pay attention to next time I watch a presentation. Like, they might be like, oh, well, when they said this, and I might not have even paid attention to that thing that they just pointed out. And
Right.
so even if they didn't understand it on a high level, they might have given me something to pay attention to next time I watch somebody speak. And it's just this big rabbit hole of the benefits of going to events, the benefits of going and experiencing education in person. Because like, I've also in the past made the argument that, like, like, if you can't make it in person, you could always like jump onto the online seminars and stuff. But at the same time, the energetic shift that you get from being with other people who kind of have that same chaotic idea of like, I'm going to do this for a living, or like, I'm really passionate about like getting people who are older to be able to do all the things that they want to do. Like, that's
Yeah.
just that's what I eat, sleep, and breathe. That said, you and I connected in person for the first time at the Real Coaches Summit.
Yeah.
And the energy that you carried at that event kind of stuck with me. And especially because the first year that we connected, we ended up being roommates.
Hmm.
And so it was cool to kind of like level up the bromance to a whole nother level, because we would get to share space. We got to have extra conversations that we wouldn't have had time for
Yeah.
otherwise. And one thing that really stuck with me, which is what I grabbed before we started this, was you left me a note. And I thought it was so like wholesome. So what I find is that a lot of people have a lot of room to grow with their soft skills in the industry, not only with their clients, but also like with their colleagues. And this is an example of your soft skills in work. So I'm going to read the letter because I just thought it was awesome. So
All
it's
right.
like, it said, Chris, I can't say enough how grateful I am to be able to call you a friend. I'm glad we were able to connect in person for the first time ever, and that we share the same opinion on what a good chair feels like. Let me know when you are done with the website updates. I want to check it out. And then it said, if there is ever a way I can help you on anything, please let me know. Love, your friend, George Pagan III. And then at the bottom, it said, anything but murder. I don't do that anymore. Not since the instant. Haha. And so I've held on to that. I kept it in my closet, just like as the same way I keep like old pictures of family and stuff. I'm like, no, that's staying around pretty much till the end of time, because it's little things like that that anchor people. It's little things like that that keep people in the industry. Like, I've received a few letters over the course of my career, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, that was a tough week. And then I'll go to the letter, and I might not have even been considering like quitting anything, but I would be thinking like, oh wow, like, am I even doing anything? And then you read a letter and you're like, oh, I'm doing stuff. And like, for me, even just reading that today, clearly I was working on my website, which is funny because like I'm working on my website again. Like I did one new iteration like a few months ago, and then I met up with a friend of mine who's like 10 years younger than me here in Edmonton, and he taught me some new stuff. And so now I'm working on another new
Nice.
iteration of my website. But it's just as we talked about before, the days blur together and we kind of lose track of how far we've come, like in a year's span. Like I know since you've opened your facility, it feels like you've had your facility open for forever now
Yeah.
because time has flown by so fast. It feels like, oh yeah, like if I'm going to that part of the US, I would obviously stop by to visit George because he has a facility and it's been there a long time. But in retrospect, when you're in the thick of it, it can also feel like you just started the thing. Like for me, when we flipped the script, there's a lot of times when I think about, well, I just started training people. It's very easy for me to adopt that beginner mindset because it's very easy for me to remember what it was like when I was first applying to different gyms or when I was
Mhm.
first doing like the schooling to be certified, like completing different assignments on the different planes of motion, stuff like that. And all of that said, we don't experience these moments if we don't go to conferences. And I, the more that I see careers unfold, including my own, particularly my own, the more I realize how important it is for people to kind of stick their neck out and like really promote in person events. And a person might ask me, because I have a very strong bias towards the Real Coaches Summit in Las Vegas, they might ask me, like, why that one? And the reason is because continuing education is expensive, travel is expensive. And of all the ones that I can think of, have access to, am connected to, that one is probably the most cost effective. And then a person might be like, oh, well, Chris, you're Canadian. Like, don't you think you could find something equivalent in Canada? And I think that based on leverage and like thinking about it as like the people in the room as assets, that one is the highest value because that one brings in the biggest international community.
Mhm.
Like you got Canadians, you have Americans, you have a few people outside of North America. And then it's just you have the most direct flight for most people traveling there. There's a few, like obviously people on the west side of the continent have an easier time and
Oh
people on the
yeah.
east side have a tougher time. But all said and done, there's a lot of flights that go into Las Vegas, whereas
Yeah.
other places they're reducing flights. There's a lot of accommodations and conference rooms in Vegas, whereas other places you'd have to travel like 30 minutes to get to where the conference is held, or you'd have to travel a great distance to get from the airport to where the city or town is.
Right.
So it removes friction. And I think about things like the letter, and I think, okay, like I wouldn't even have that if I hadn't gone to the Real Coaches Summit that year. Like that would not have happened. It wouldn't be a thing.
True.
We would have probably still been putting out podcasts because a lot of people on my podcast I haven't met in person, but it wouldn't have that same like sentiment. We wouldn't
Yeah.
have sort of like that invested interests in each other's milestones because we kind of like sat next to that person, had food with that person, and really had increased buy-in. So that said, what has been your experience with going to in-person events? And it doesn't necessarily have to be Real Coaches Summit. It could just be in-person events in general. Like what are the pros? What are the cons for you?
I mean, the pros, like you said, are all people related. So
Mm-hmm.
the presentations are always a plus. Love learning. I'm never gonna not learn. So I mean, I can do that any way I want. And the in-person part gets me to kind of do both of the things that I like doing. I like talking to people. I like talking to people who are like-minded and who, even in different industries, are relatively similar in our passion for whatever mission that we have. So like the Real Coaches Summit one specifically, since we both met there, like in person, it's like we were able to further see how aligned we are in terms of the things that we're trying to focus on, whether it be, specifically in the personal training realm, or if it's just like how we want to approach our career and our work. And that is always helpful for me when I'm meeting other people, because I'm, I live in my own bubble. I have my own biases, and the people that I interact with on a daily basis is pretty small. So being able to meet other people and kind of see where I might have blind spots based on this, bubble that I live in, is incredibly helpful. And like you said, you get to learn from the presentation itself, and then by somebody else's perspective, from how they heard and listened to the presentation. Because I can take notes directly next to somebody, and we can have two completely different, topics based on what the presentation was given, like in our notes. Like I can focus on one aspect and they can be focusing on something else that I just might have missed because I was more geared towards something that I am familiar with, or that I was like, oh yeah, of course, this, kind of supports my own bias. So I'm just going to make an extra note of that, and might have missed something else that I can actually learn from. And that's why, like I said, it's the people interaction part is huge. I mean, I like talking. I like talking to new people. I like exploring what people have going on personally, professionally. I like being helpful too. So if I can help somebody in, my years as being a personal trainer and being, independent for the majority of that time, or even some of this, industry specific struggles that I've, had to kind of work my way around, whether they were minor or major, like I love being able to share some of that. So, I mean, that's like selfishly, that's one of the things I like to do at these events, is just like, interact with people on a, human basis. Like we're all professionals, but it's not like we're this, only this persona of being a coach 24/7. Like I put on a coach's hat when I train people, like literally, so like quite literally I put a hat on, but it's like, I'm still just this, goofball person who's, maybe 14 years old on the inside and, almost 40 on the outside. So it's just like, it's not like I want to just be this robotic career driven person. I want to interact with people as a human. And that's why I like the in-person events more, I would say, than a lot of the online learning stuff.
I want to pause here for a second because this connects directly to the kind of conversations that we have on this show. Chasing common ground has never been about hacks, shortcuts, or chasing attention. It's about long-term thinking, craft, and building something that actually lasts. And the same philosophy is why I built my podcast course. It's about fundamentals and foundations. How to start a podcast, how to structure it, how to stay consistent, and how to build simple workflows so your show fits into your life instead of competing with it. The course is updated constantly with gear reviews, standard operating procedures, AI tools, and best practices. It's not because things change fast, but because clarity matters. I want to share a quick clip from someone many of you already know about, Andrew Coates. He's a good friend of mine, and he is the host of Live Free and Diet Hard, a published writer, speaker, and longtime coach. Here's what he had to say.
I'm going to give a shout to my producer because he's a beauty. Chris Little, he's the one who does all the back-end stuff. He does all the slides. He's the one who puts together all the ads. And I couldn't do this stuff without him. He's great. He's got his own podcast, but he's also got courses, and he will answer your questions if you guys are literally interested in podcasting. He's great at this stuff. So go check him out. Just search Christian Little on Instagram. I follow him. You'll find him. He's super.
If you're thinking about starting a podcast, or you already have one and want it to feel simpler, more intentional, and more sustainable, you can learn more at christianlittle.com/podcast course. And as a thank you to listeners of Chasing Common Ground, you can save $50 with the code Common Ground, one word, all caps, at checkout. Pricing is in Canadian dollars. Thank you, and now let's get back to the podcast. Yeah. So you brought something up that made me think of a question that's going to be framed very difficultly. So you can answer it however you like.
Okay.
But the way that I was thinking, you talked about how you could recognize when you were kind of in your own bubble because of just interactions with just a select amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew yourself enough to know the difference between that and the version of you where you like talking, you like helping people, and you like being in the event, mixing and mingling in person. Have you ever come across a friend or a colleague in the space where you knew them locally and you could pick up on the fact that they may have been experiencing the version of you that you experienced when you were more in your bubble, And if so, what were some of like the clues of that? How could you tell that they probably were closer to you when you were in your bubble versus you when you're mixing and mingling at different conferences and learning from like Katie and other various people like that?
I don't know. It's hard to tell because I don't really go to events with a lot of people locally that I know. I'm usually traveling by myself to events that I'm going to. So I go into them really not usually not knowing many people, or it's like maybe a select few amount of people. And then I just try to check in with myself. Like sometimes I get caught up in being, like you said, like being this one version of myself because I'm kind of stuck in that on a daily basis. Being a coach to people and interacting with people on that level, that I have to kind of shut that off sometimes and just remember, like, I'm only this type of person some of the times. Like I don't have to carry that over into, you know, the rest of my personality, I guess you could say. Like just
Yeah.
be just you know, try not to mince my words too much with things, and just relax a little bit. No one is trying to judge me specifically.
Yeah.
And if it is something that I do notice, like, oh shoot, like I interacted with as somebody that is as a little bit robotic, like it's kind of like, then I try to just bring it back, and you know, maybe I'll crack a joke on something and make sure that they're understanding, like I'm not this like you know, super professional person all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, I don't go to events with a lot of people already like that I know. So
Yeah.
it's always I try to remember, like, nobody, like you said, nobody is really judging you outright based on, you know, how you present to them, as long as it's not like being a complete, you know, sociopath, I guess you could say, or, you know, not being an a-hole in any way.
Yeah.
Right? Just, you know, being a normal person, like interacting with like a stranger as you normally would a friendly stranger.
Well, I think something that you brought up that was kind of, not everybody would notice this part, but when you talk about how when you go to events, you're often going to them solo. So it's like the whole thing, the whole point is that you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
That's like one of the biggest reasons a lot of people don't go to events, because they're thinking, well, I can't go because I don't know anybody. And if they could even just latch on to that whole formula, it's like, that's the point.
Right.
Like, if anything, go to the events where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm like, well, it's about time I go to something where I don't know people, because most of the things I go to, I know like most of the people.
Yeah.
And I definitely do that a lot outside of the fitness industry. Like, I learn about all kinds of things, like everything from watches to investing to real estate. Like, I just like learning about kinds of stuff, like even just cooking and different like culinary dishes from different cultures. But I think that needs to be a prominent thing for people to realize. Like, if you are hesitant to go to something because you won't know anybody there, that's the whole point to go.
Yeah.
That's where the biggest growth comes from. And like, that's, even though I feel like I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you feel like you know a lot of people too, rightfully so, because your podcast that you have with Fitletes showcases like at least a few hundred people, I think, by now.
That worked.
And
Almost starting season 3 soon.
well, how many people have you collected?
It's like 62 total, so not too many yet. It's only been
Okay.
30 per season so far.
The format is fantastic, so
Thanks.
I'll definitely have links for that in the show notes so that people can check that out. But like, even as I reflect on how much people you and I have both been able to connect with, it wasn't too long ago that we didn't know all those people. So the people
Yeah.
who are hesitant to connect, like, the only difference between them knowing a lot of people and not knowing a lot of people is going to the place where you don't know anybody. And as long as it's within your scope of work, like, as long, like, it's one thing to encourage people who aren't even in the fitness industry to attend a conference. Like, that makes no sense to attend a fitness conference if you're not in the fitness industry. But if you're actively serving people and you want to help people be pain free, or have more lean body mass, or be more confident, or whatever it may be, maybe it's to like hit a ball further in tennis.
Yeah.
No matter what those goals are, they're going to undoubtedly benefit from being in rooms with people that you don't know, or from being in rooms where you're not the smartest person. Like that's my favorite way to look at it, is like nothing bad will happen to me if I admit that I don't know everything, especially if I
Right.
kind of position myself where at least I'll know more than I did yesterday, and then continue to nurture those connections so that as those people grow, I grow too. And it's like that expression, like a rising tide lifts all ships,
Yep.
or some variation of that. It's so true. Like all of us could teach each other everything that we know, even if it was behind a paywall, and nobody's business would suffer. Like
Right.
I could teach you everything that I know about podcasts that's in my podcast course. And the truth is there's so much stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to retain it all, but you would benefit from what you needed to benefit in that moment. I could talk to you about my workflow. I could talk to you about different like tech things that I've learned, like how my camera shut off and how I always have two other cameras connected so I can toggle between, or how my connection buffered and we lost connection. And so when I edit, I use a transcript based editor. And so it doesn't take forever to find that spot in the conversation to where it dropped off. And it goes the same with like if we talk to a physical therapist where they've worked with a specific clientele and they can share with us like how to verbally cue an exercise where it clicks, and maybe we've not tried that before.
Yeah.
And they don't lose out on clients, and then
No.
all of a sudden we serve our people better, and it probably helps them sleep better at night, because when everybody's taking care of their people, a really good coach or a really good trainer is that much more happy because the industry's better for it. Now, that said, we've talked about sort of like the business training side of things. I'd love to learn just a little bit about what is a personal goal that you have, something that's non-work related, something that's just for you that you hope to achieve in the next little bit here.
Is to really, like we talked about, having the balance of work and not work,
Yeah.
is to get more of my time spent on some of the hobbies that I have. Is like, yeah, like, when you're really in the mix of doing work related stuff, some of those hobby things can kind of fall to the wayside. And I really do love art, so I want to keep not pushing myself, but keep reminding myself that I can take as much time or as little time as I want to draw and paint. And it doesn't have to be something that's in, work related, productive. And maybe sometimes I can blend those things together and create some piece of art that I use for work, or put in the gym that I have. Like, maybe I can, do something like that, keep the theme of the gym kind of the same, but like I get to create another piece of art that I can hang in the walls in the gym. Or like like I've been doing recently is like I've been making some really simple digital designs for t-shirts and branding stuff that I want to put on a t-shirt for my my brand. But it's like, again I can just kind of blend those two things together a little bit, or I can keep them completely separate and just create different paintings and drawings, because I really do enjoy, like, enjoy doing those things.
Yeah. That is so relatable for me because I'm sitting in my shirt. It's my Creatino shirt. And so I have this character that I've named Don Creatino, and it started. I do jujitsu periodically from time to time. Sometimes I do it once a week. Sometimes I miss a few months, but I try to stay with it. And at one point, asked a question in my Instagram stories, and I think it was something along the lines of something fitness related, and somebody brought up The Godfather. And so then I took that and I made Godfather themed content. So I made this character named Don Creatino, and he promoted that creatine was beneficial, one of the most widely researched supplements for somebody who is trying to get through a plateau of their strength and they just want to get things that much more dialed in. Creatine could probably benefit them, and if nothing else, cause no harm, with the exception of like if a doctor recommended do not do creatine. And it just turned into something. It turned into like one of my most shared posts aside from the times I edit videos for like hockey and stuff. And so then, yeah, I had that same creative vision where I wanted to create merchandise that not only related to like my philosophy around training, but also some of the silly things that I incorporate into my banter, both in the online space and just like inside jokes with in-person people.
Mhm.
And so I definitely support and understand like that whole lens on looking at things. And I'll quickly show you my painting because I have a painting nearby.
All right.
All right. So I had this handy
Nice.
because a while back I wanted to just think. And I knew that the best way to think was to have something that kind of anchored me into that whole like, don't go anywhere, stay put, and just think through what you're going through. And this was back in a time when I was still kind of in like the spin instructor world.
Okay.
I hadn't been instructing in a while, but I had wanted to audition. And I was like, okay, now this audition is going to take everything I got. It was probably when I was my leanest body composition. Like everything was dialed in, but my rhythm was a bit off. And I didn't quite have like that motivational presence that people needed from a spin instructor. And so in that process of coming to terms with the fact that like sometimes your goals can look differently than what you imagined, I also kind of decided, I was like, well, no matter what's going to happen, I'm going to lead a life that's built off of abundance. So I'm always going to have enriching experiences. And while I might like now that I am where I am, looking back on that, everything that happened the way it happened made sense
Mhm.
because the paths that I found myself in to help people, to mentor people, to coach people, to whatever, to even learn from people were a lot more progressive than if I had had that other thing work out. But in order to come to that conclusion, I had to do something meditative. And so sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's building Lego. I got a lot of Lego around here nowadays. And sometimes it's just like listening to music or going for a walk.
Yeah.
But all of that said, I want to be mindful of your time. I have one more question for
Okay.
you that I've pulled up from the vault. This is a question that I used to ask people when I first started the podcast.
Ooh, all right.
And then I stopped asking people because I felt that it had gone stale. It sounded too cliche.
Okay.
And then a lot of life had happened, and I was like, oh no, that question is probably one of the best parts of listening to an old episode when it used to be called The Lifestyle Chase. So it was, if you were to give a person one piece of advice on how to live their life to the fullest in the most authentic way, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say is to challenge what you think your limits are. Like that, usually they're set way too low, to be honest. And I think it's a good philosophy to remind yourself of, is like you can do a lot more than you think in any way, professionally, personally. I think that's important because it's really easy to not do things, but it's really fulfilling when you decide to kind of up the ante a little bit and try to do something. Whether you end up being successful at that one thing or not, the journey that you can go on through trying something is really important, and it's something I've grown to embrace a little bit more because I'm pretty risk averse in doing a
Yeah.
lot of things, and I try to be a little bit too calculated sometimes before making a decision. And again, most of it's just based on some of the limitations that I've set up for myself. So it's like to really challenge some of those self-perceived limits that you put on is important, I think.
That is incredible advice. And I hope people take it to heart and apply it to the area of their life that they feel the biggest deficit. Because sometimes people are like, oh, well, like I'll step out of my comfort zone in my career, but my personal life, I got to keep a cap on that. Like I can only go so far. So if you're ascending in your career and your personal life feels constrained, then remind yourself that you're capable of more in your personal life. And if it's flipped the other way, personal life is crushing it and career is kind of struggling, then remind yourself that there's a lot of people out there with a career that they enjoy doing every day, that covers all the bases, covers all the bills, allows them everything that they need to save. And while it required a lot of grit and resilience to get to where they are now, they wouldn't change a thing if you gave them the chance. All that said, thank you so much again for joining me on the show today, George.
Absolutely.